The plane landed beneath a sky heavy with rain clouds, and Amelia pressed her forehead lightly against the window as the city slowly came into view below. 3 years. 3 years of working overseas, of endless night shifts and lonely apartments, of counting holidays through phone screens and celebrating anniversaries with unstable internet connections. 3 years of sacrifice. 3 years of believing every promise her husband made. Danielle always said the same thing whenever exhaustion nearly broke her spirit. Just hold on a little longer. When you come home, everything will finally be different. She had carried those words like a lifeline. Everything will change. She believed him. She believed every late night call, every message filled with hearts, every whispered promise about the future waiting for them. And now she was finally home. A small smile touched her face as she stepped through the airport carrying a single suitcase. Daniel thought she would arrive 2 weeks later. She had planned the surprise carefully. She imagined his face when he opened the door and saw her standing there unexpectedly. She pictured his shocked smile, his arms around her, maybe even tears in his eyes. For months, that image had carried her through homesickness and exhaustion. Outside, warm air wrapped around her as she climbed into a taxi. During the drive, she watched familiar streets pass by the window. The city looked the same and different at once. Buildings seemed older, trees looked smaller. Time had moved without her. Her phone suddenly vibrated. A message from Sarah. Welcome home. Did Danielle know? Amelia smiled. No. Surprise. Several seconds passed. Then another message appeared. Wait, you're back today? Amelia frowned slightly. Yes. Why? This time the reply took longer. Nothing. Call me later. Amelia stared at the screen. Something about it felt strange. A tiny discomfort, a small shadow moving somewhere at the edge of her thoughts, but she pushed it aside. 40 minutes later, the taxi turned into a neighborhood. Then Amelia stopped breathing. Cars lined both sides of the street. White ribbons fluttered from fences. Music drifted through the air. And ahead, directly in front of her house, people dressed in elegant clothes walked through decorated gates covered in flowers. The driver looked ahead and smiled. Looks like someone is having a wedding. Wedding. Amelia felt the word hit her chest. Slowly, very slowly, she lifted her eyes toward the house. Her house. And suddenly, for reasons she could not explain, a cold feeling crawled through her entire body. Amelia stood beside the taxi without moving. For a moment, the world around her felt strangely distant, as if every sound had suddenly been pushed underwater. The music continued somewhere ahead. Soft piano notes drifted through the air while guests laughed behind the white flower decorations. But Amelia barely heard any of it. Her eyes remained fixed on the house. No. The thought appeared instantly. No, this has to be some mistake. Maybe neighbors were hosting an event. Maybe someone rented the yard next door. Maybe there was a simple explanation waiting just a few steps ahead. There had to be. She paid the driver without taking her eyes off the house. Her fingers moved automatically. The man handed her the receipt and drove away, leaving Amelia standing alone on the sidewalk with her suitcase beside her. Wind brushed softly against her face. Slowly, she pulled the suitcase forward and walked toward the gate. One step, then another. The wheels rolled across the pavement with a quiet scraping sound that suddenly felt too loud. As she moved closer, details became clearer. White flowers lined the pathway. Rows of chairs filled the yard. Elegant fabric hung from trees. And then she saw faces. People she knew, neighbors, old family friends, even Danielle's cousin. Amelia slowed. Something inside her chest tightened. One woman turned and saw her. The smile instantly disappeared from her face. Then another person looked, and another. Conversation stopped. Laughter faded. A strange silence moved through the crowd almost unnaturally, spreading from person to person like a cold wind. Amelia felt her stomach drop. No one looked happy to see her. No one looked surprised. They looked frightened. Some lowered their eyes. Others looked away completely. A man Amelia had known for years suddenly became deeply interested in his phone. Two women exchanged nervous glances. Someone whispered quietly. Another person shook their head. Amelia's heart began beating harder, faster, hard enough that she could hear it. Then the front door opened, and Sarah stepped outside. The color disappeared from Amelia's face immediately because Sarah looked like someone who had seen a ghost. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened slightly, and for several seconds she simply stared. Amelia. Her voice barely came out. Amelia looked at her friend carefully. Sarah wasn't surprised. She wasn't confused. She looked terrified. And suddenly, that tiny shadow Amelia had ignored inside the taxi began growing into something much larger, something darker, something that made her hands turn cold. Sarah, Amelia said quietly. Silence. Wind moved the white ribbons hanging nearby. Sarah looked toward the house, then back at Amelia, and Amelia noticed tears beginning to form in her eyes. That was the moment fear truly entered her heart. Amelia stared at Sarah, searching her face for an explanation, for anything that would make sense of the fear in her eyes. But Sarah said nothing. She simply stood there, frozen beneath the wedding decorations, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. The silence felt wrong, too heavy, too long. Amelia swallowed slowly. Sarah, what's happening? Sarah opened her mouth, closed it, looked toward the house again, then lowered her eyes. That single movement felt sharper than any answer. Amelia felt her heartbeat begin pounding harder. No, 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 no. Her mind immediately searched for reasons. Maybe someone had died. Maybe there had been an emergency. Maybe Danielle was hurt. Maybe. Say something. Her voice cracked. Sarah looked up again. There were tears in her eyes now, real tears. And suddenly, Amelia felt fear wrap itself around her chest because people did not look at someone like that unless something terrible had happened. Around them, guests remained unnaturally quiet. Nobody moved, nobody smiled, nobody walked over to greet her. They simply watched. Watching her felt easier than speaking. Watching her felt safer than telling the truth. Amelia slowly looked around at the familiar faces, people she had known for years, people who attended her own wedding, people who had smiled beside her in photographs, and now every one of them avoided her eyes. Everyone. The cold feeling spread deeper. Then Emilia noticed something. Near the entrance stood a large decorative board surrounded by white flowers. She had not looked at it before. Maybe because part of her had not wanted to. Maybe because some hidden instinct had already begun protecting her. Slowly, almost against her own will, her eyes moved toward it, toward the names written in elegant gold letters. At first, her mind refused to understand what she was seeing. The words sat there plainly, visible, impossible. For a second, her thoughts simply stopped. Then the words tilted, because written beneath the flowers were two names. One name belonged to a woman Amelia had never heard before, and the other name was Daniel's, her husband's name, her husband. The suitcase slipped from Amelia's hand and hit the ground. No one moved. No one spoke. Because at that exact moment, every person standing there realized the same terrible truth. Amelia had just arrived at her husband's wedding, and she had never even known he was getting married. For several seconds, Amelia simply stared. She did not blink. She did not breathe. She stood motionless as the gold letters blurred before her eyes. No, the word echoed inside her mind instantly. No, this is impossible. Her thoughts refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. They refused to connect the pieces standing directly in front of her. Because if they did, then everything she believed over the last 3 years would collapse at once. Daniel, her husband, her Daniel. The man who called her every night. The man who told her he missed her. The man who promised they were building a future together. The man who ended every conversation with the same words, I love you. Amelia slowly shook her head, very slowly. as if denying reality itself. No. The word escaped her lips quietly. Sarah stepped toward her. Amelia. No. This time louder. People nearby shifted uncomfortably. Still no one spoke. Still no one looked directly at her. Because everyone already knew. Everyone. Everyone except her. The realization struck harder than the wedding sign itself. Not just Daniel, not just betrayal. An entire crowd of people had known. Neighbors, friends, relatives, people who smiled during video calls, people who asked how she was doing overseas, people who listened while she talked about how much she missed her husband. They knew, and nobody told her. Amelia suddenly felt something tear inside her chest, not physically, something deeper, something invisible. Memory after memory rushed through her mind. Daniel saying he was busy and couldn't video call. Daniel canceling visits. Daniel telling her work had become stressful. Daniel sounding distracted. Daniel ending conversations early. Small things, tiny things. Things she ignored because love teaches people dangerous levels of trust. Because trust does something strange. It blinds. And now those forgotten moments returned all at once like pieces of shattered glass, each one cutting deeper. Sarah reached for her hand carefully. Amelia, please listen. Amelia stepped back immediately. Her breathing became uneven. No. Tears gathered in her eyes now. Not soft tears, not quiet sadness. Shock, pure shock. Then suddenly music inside the house changed. People turned. The ceremony music had started. And from somewhere inside the house, voices rose. Excited voices, smiling voices. The wedding was beginning. Amelia slowly lifted her eyes towards the open doorway, toward the place where Daniel stood somewhere inside, toward the man who still had absolutely no idea she was home, no idea she was standing only a few feet away. And in that moment, through the heartbreak and confusion and disbelief, another feeling quietly appeared. Not sadness, not fear, something else, something harder, something colder. Because Amelia suddenly realized one thing. She had spent 3 years imagining surprising Daniel, and now she was about to, just not the way she planned. Amelia wiped at her eyes, but the tears kept coming. Not because she wanted to cry, not because she wanted sympathy. Her body simply no longer knew what to do with the pain. Everything inside her felt numb and burning at the same time. Sarah moved closer again. Please, let me explain. Amelia looked at her slowly. Explain? The word felt almost absurd. Explain what? Explain how a husband secretly planned a wedding while his wife worked herself to exhaustion in another country. Explain how an entire neighborhood watched it happen. Explain how everyone around her somehow decided she was the only person who did not deserve the truth. Amelia stared into Sarah's eyes. Then she asked the question quietly. How long? Sarah froze, completely froze, and Amelia felt her stomach tighten because silence was an answer. Sometimes silence told the truth faster than words ever could. Sarah, her voice dropped lower. How long? Sarah looked away, just for a second. But 1 second was enough. 8 months. The world seemed to stop. Amelia blinked. Maybe she heard wrong. Maybe her mind misunderstood. How long? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. 8 months. Amelia stared at her. 8 months, not days, not weeks. 8 months. 8 months while Daniel called her. 8 months while he told her he loved her. 8 months while she worked overtime and skipped meals to save money for their future. 8 months while she sent gifts. 8 months while she counted days on calendars. 8 months. Something inside Amelia slowly collapsed, not violently, not all at once, quietly, like an old building finally giving up after years of hidden damage. Sarah covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. I wanted to tell you. Amelia said nothing. I swear I wanted to. Still nothing. But Daniel said he was going to explain everything himself. Amelia laughed. and the sound frightened even her because there was no happiness in it, no humor, only disbelief, only pain. Explain. Explain what exactly? That he accidentally found another woman? That he accidentally planned a wedding? That he accidentally invited hundreds of guests? No. Some things were not mistakes. Some things were choices. Slow, deliberate choices made over time. And then Amelia noticed movement near the doorway. People inside had started standing, smiling, turning toward the staircase. The ceremony was beginning. Someone whispered excitedly, "The groom's coming." The groom, not husband, not Daniel, the groom. Amelia slowly lifted her eyes. Her tears stopped, not because the pain ended, because something else had taken its place, a terrifying calm. And before Sarah could stop her, Amelia reached down, picked up her suitcase, and started walking toward the house. "Amelia," Sarah's voice broke behind her. "Please don't do this." But Amelia kept walking, slowly, quietly, one step after another. The sound of her suitcase wheels rolled across the stone path beneath her feet. Around her, guests immediately moved aside. Nobody stopped her, nobody spoke. People simply stared. Some looked uncomfortable, some looked guilty, others looked afraid, because deep down they all understood the same thing. A storm had arrived, and they were standing directly in its path. Amelia walked beneath the white decorations and through the open doorway of the house she once called home. Her home. The place she and Daniel painted together after getting married. The place where they laughed over burned dinners and cheap furniture. The place where they made promises about children and growing old together. And now strangers filled every corner. Flowers covered tables. Music floated through the rooms. Candles flickered softly. Everything looked beautiful. Everything looked perfect. And somehow that hurt even more because Danielle had built all of this while speaking to her every night, while pretending, while lying. Amelia continued forward. Her breathing remained calm now, almost too calm. Some guests recognized her immediately. Their expressions changed the moment they saw her. One woman covered her mouth. A man nearly dropped his drink. Another quickly turned away. Whispers began spreading across the room, soft at first, then louder. "She's here. Oh my God. Daniel's wife. Did he know?" No. The words followed Amelia as she walked, but they sounded distant, very distant, because another sound had taken over everything else. Her heart beat, steady, heavy. Then she reached the large staircase near the center of the room, and there she saw him, Daniel. He stood near the bottom steps wearing a dark suit, smiling, laughing. His hand rested casually in his pocket while relatives surrounded him. He looked happy, completely happy. For one unbearable second, Amelia simply stared. 3 years. 3 years of missing him. 3 years of sacrifices. 3 years of loving a man standing only feet away. And at first, he did not see her. He kept smiling, kept laughing, completely unaware. Then someone near him looked up. Their face changed instantly. Daniel noticed. His smile faded slightly. Confused, he turned, and then he saw her. Everything stopped. Absolutely everything. The color drained from his face so fast it looked almost unreal. His smile disappeared. His body froze. Even his breathing seemed to stop. Across the room, husband and wife stared at each other. Neither moved, neither spoke, and for the first time since arriving home, Daniel looked like the one who had seen a ghost. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The music continued playing softly in the background, but it felt wrong now. Completely wrong. Like the room itself had not realized something terrible had just happened. Danielle stared at Amelia. Amelia stared back. Across the distance between them stood 3 years of memories, promises, sacrifices, and lies. And suddenly none of it looked real anymore. Daniel's lips parted slightly. No words came out. Not a single word. Because what could he possibly say? Welcome home? You came early? This isn't what it looks like? Amelia watched panic slowly spread across his face. Real panic, not surprise, not confusion, fear. Because Danielle understood something in that moment, he had lost control. For months, maybe years, he controlled every conversation, every excuse, every carefully built lie. He decided what Amelia knew and what she didn't. He chose the timing, he chose the story, but not anymore. Now reality stood directly in front of him, breathing, watching, and everyone else was watching too. Around the room, whispers had completely taken over. Guests stared openly now. Some looked toward Daniel, some looked toward Amelia, others glanced toward exits as if they suddenly wanted to disappear. No one wanted to stand inside this moment. No one wanted to be part of what came next. Then Daniel finally moved, one step forward. Amelia, his voice sounded weak, unsteady. Amelia felt her chest tighten at the sound of it. That voice, she had waited for that voice, missed that voice, fallen asleep listening to that voice through phone speakers thousands of miles away. And now hearing it felt unbearable. Danielle took another step. Listen to me. Amelia said nothing. He swallowed, looked around quickly, as if searching for escape, as if searching for the right lie, the right explanation, the right words. But some situations cannot be repaired with words. Some betrayals become too large, too visible, too real. Daniel reached out slightly, not enough to touch her, just enough. Please, let me explain. Silence. Amelia looked at him carefully, really looked at him, at the expensive suit, at the flowers behind him, at the decorations, at the wedding ring still sitting on his finger, their wedding ring. And then, slowly, she looked toward the staircase, toward the top, because someone else had appeared, a woman, dressed entirely in white, standing perfectly still, watching everything, the bride, and judging by the expression on her face, she had absolutely no idea Daniel already had a wife. The room grew unnaturally quiet. Even the whispers began fading, because one by one, people turned toward the staircase, toward the woman in white. She stood motionless near the top step, her hand still resting lightly against the railing. Only minutes earlier, she had probably been smiling, preparing herself for one of the happiest moments of her life. Now all color had disappeared from her face. Her eyes moved slowly between Danielle and Amelia, back and forth, again and again. Confusion, then concern, then something else, something heavier, something beginning to break. Danielle turned, and the moment he saw her standing there, whatever color remained in his face vanished completely. For the first time since Amelia arrived, his fear changed because now he understood something even worse. His lies had collided. Both worlds stood in the same room, both women, both truths, and there was nowhere left to run. The bride took one slow step downward, then another. The entire room watched in silence. No music, no movement, nothing. Only the sound of her heels against wood. Step, step, step until she reached the bottom. She looked directly at Danielle, who her voice shook. She swallowed, then looked toward Amelia. Who is she? Daniel opened his mouth, closed it. No answer. Not immediately. And silence once again told the truth before words could. The bride stared at him, longer this time, then slowly looked toward Emilia. Emilia looked back. For a moment, neither woman spoke, neither moved, and Amelia suddenly saw something in her eyes. Not anger, not jealousy, pain, pure pain. Because in that moment, Amelia realized something she had not considered until now. This woman looked shocked, completely shocked, not guilty, not nervous, shocked, which meant only one thing. She did not know. She had no idea. Daniel had not betrayed one woman, he betrayed two. The realization hit Amelia harder than she expected because suddenly she was no longer looking at a rival. She was looking at another victim, another person standing in the ruins of Daniel's lies. Daniel finally stepped forward. Wait, I can explain. But nobody looked at him. Nobody. The bride's eyes never left Amelia. Then finally, barely above a whisper, she asked, Please. Her voice cracked. Tell me who you are. The room became perfectly still. Amelia looked at Danielle, then at the terrified woman standing beside him. And after several long seconds, she spoke, calmly, clearly. My name is Amelia. Silence. She looked directly into the bride's eyes, then said the words that shattered everything. I'm Danielle's wife. The words hung in the air like something fragile that had just been shattered beyond repair. I'm Danielle's wife. For a heartbeat, nobody reacted. Not because they didn't understand, but because understanding it fully meant accepting something too large, too violent for the mind to process all at once. The bride stepped back slightly, one step, then another. Her hand slowly lifted to her mouth as if trying to physically hold herself together. No, the word came out broken, barely audible. Her eyes stayed locked on Amelia, but her voice wasn't really aimed at her. It was aimed at reality itself. That's not possible. Danielle's body finally moved, suddenly, sharply. He turned toward her. Wait, no, listen to me. His voice cracked under pressure. Don't, don't believe this like that. But the bride didn't even look at him anymore. Not fully. Her eyes were fixed on Amelia, searching, measuring, trying to deny what her instincts were already confirming. Amelia stood still, perfectly still. Her suitcase remained beside her, where she had dropped it earlier, forgotten now like everything else in the room. Her expression was not loud, nor chaotic. It was quiet, but inside her, something had already crossed a threshold. There was no going back from this moment. The bride's voice shook again. You said you were single. Danielle flinched. That was enough. That single reaction was enough for her to understand the truth without needing another word. The bride laughed once, a short, broken sound. Then she looked down at her own hands as if she didn't recognize them anymore. I left my family for this wedding. Her voice cracked further. I left everything. Daniel stepped forward quickly. No, 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 this is not what it looks like. Amelia finally moved, just slightly. She turned her head toward him, and that small movement alone made him stop talking. Because he saw something in her eyes now, not hysteria, not confusion, clarity, cold, sharp clarity. Amelia spoke quietly. How long have you known me? Daniel froze. The question wasn't loud, but it hit harder than any shout could have. I, Amelia, how long? Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The entire room was already listening like it was a courtroom waiting for judgment. Daniel swallowed. His eyes darted around the room. People were watching him now differently, not as a groom, not as a man celebrating love, but as something else, something exposed. Yes, he said weakly. Amelia nodded once, slowly. And how long have you known her? Silence dropped again. He didn't answer immediately. That hesitation was everything. The bride took another step back. Her breathing became uneven. Daniel tried to reach toward her, but she pulled away instantly. Don't touch me. The words were sharp now, not broken, not confused, sharp. Daniel's hand froze midair. Amelia watched both of them, not interfering, not shouting, just observing the collapse of a structure she had unknowingly been standing outside of for years. Then the bride suddenly turned fully to Daniel. Her voice rose for the first time. You told me you had no one. Daniel's face tightened. I was going to explain when. The question cut through him. When exactly were you going to explain this? No answer. Again, silence answered for him. The bride's eyes filled again, but this time she blinked hard, forcing the tears down. I planned everything with you. Her voice shook. Everything. She pointed slightly toward Amelia without fully looking at her. And you let me come here like this? Daniel shook his head rapidly. No, no, it's not like that. Amelia finally spoke again, quietly. But it is. 3 words, nothing more. But they landed like a final lock clicking into place. The bride turned toward Amelia fully now. Her voice softened slightly, not because the pain disappeared, but because it shifted. I didn't know. Amelia held her gaze. I know. That response changed something in the air because it removed blame from the immediate moment and placed it where it truly belonged, back on Daniel. The room began to murmur again. Low voices, shocked voices, angry voices. People who had been silent witnesses now could no longer remain invisible inside it. Someone in the back said, "This is insane." Another whispered, "He had 2 lives." Daniel looked around desperately now, like a man realizing the walls were closing in. "I can fix this," he said suddenly. His voice rose. "I can fix this. Just everyone calm down." Amelia tilted her head slightly, almost imperceptibly, and said nothing, because there was nothing left to fix, only something left to face. And for the first time since she walked into that street, Daniel realized something even worse than exposure. There was no version of this story where he controlled the ending anymore. Daniel's voice rose again, but it no longer carried authority. It sounded strained now, almost desperate, like a man speaking louder, in the hope that volume could replace truth. "Everyone just calm down," he repeated, turning in a slow circle as if trying to address the entire room at once. This is this is a misunderstanding." A few guests exchanged uneasy looks. A misunderstanding. The word felt almost insulting in a room full of witnesses. The bride let out a shaky breath, her eyes still wet but sharper now. Whatever softness had been left in her had started hardening into something self protective. "Misunderstanding?" she echoed quietly. Daniel turned back to her quickly, as if she was still the easiest door to fix. "Yes, I I didn't tell you everything yet. That's all. I was going to. Going to what?" she interrupted. Her voice was no longer trembling. It was controlled now, controlled in a way that scared him more. "Marry me first and explain later." Silence dropped again. Amelia stood slightly apart from them, watching without speaking. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had already crossed the breaking point and was now standing on the other side of it. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This isn't what it looks like," he said again, but weaker this time. Amelia finally exhaled, a slow, tired sound. "That's exactly what it looks like." Her words weren't loud, but they cut through the room with precision. The bride looked at Amelia again, really looked at her this time, and something in her expression shifted. Not denial anymore, understanding, painful understanding. "How long were you married?" she asked quietly. Amelia didn't hesitate. "Years." The answer landed heavily. The bride closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to steady herself against something invisible pushing her down. "Years. Not a mistake. Not a secret romance. A life." Daniel stepped forward again, panic rising now. "Stop talking like this," he snapped suddenly. "You're making it worse." Both women turned their attention to him at the same time. That synchronized silence was more powerful than any argument. Amelia spoke first. "No," she said simply. "You already made it worse." Daniel pointed toward her quickly, almost reflexively. "You left. You were abroad. You were never here." Amelia's eyes narrowed slightly. "I was working," she corrected. Her voice stayed level. "Building a future you are living off." That sentence hit harder than the others. A few guests shifted uncomfortably again. The bride took a step closer now, her voice quieter but sharper. "So, while I was planning a wedding," she gestured faintly toward the room around them, "you were already married." Daniel shook his head again, faster this time. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Amelia tilted her head slightly. That phrase again. didn't mean, as if betrayal required intention to still be real. You didn't mean it, she repeated softly. Then she looked directly at him, and yet it still happened. A long silence followed. Even Danielle had nothing immediate to say to that. The bride suddenly let out a breath that sounded like it was breaking in the middle. I told my parents about you, she said quietly. Her eyes stayed on Danielle, but the words felt heavier now. I told them I found someone honest. Danielle's face tightened. The bride continued. I told them I finally felt safe. Her voice cracked slightly at the end, but she forced it back into control again. And you let me build my entire life on a lie. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed again. No words came, because there were no words left that didn't sound like collapse. Amelia looked between them once more. Two women, two different timelines, one shared ruin, and Danielle standing at the center of it, realizing too late that control had never been his to begin with. The silence stretched again, but this time it was different. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was judgment forming slowly in real time. Daniel's composure finally cracked. Enough, he snapped suddenly, his voice rising with forced authority. Both of you are acting like I committed some kind of crime. I was going to tell you, both of you, but timing, life. Things got complicated. Amelia let out a quiet, almost empty laugh. Not amused, just finished. Complicated? She repeated. The bride stepped forward, her voice shaking again, but stronger now. You planned a wedding while you were married. Daniel pointed at Amelia quickly. She wasn't here. Amelia's eyes sharpened. So absence is permission. That hit him silent for a moment. The crowd murmured louder now. Someone near the back said, "This is insane." Again, but now it carried judgment instead of shock. Daniel turned desperate. "I loved you," he said to Amelia quickly, then turned. "I care about you. This wasn't supposed to happen like this." The bride cut him off sharply. "Stop talking." The room went quiet instantly. Even Danielle stopped. She wiped her face once, breathing hard, then looked directly at him. "You didn't get confused. You didn't sleep. You built two lives and thought no one would collide." Silence. Amelia stepped slightly closer now, her voice lower. "You didn't lose control," she said. "You abused it." That word landed heavily. Abused. Daniel's face tightened, but he had nothing left to argue with. The bride removed something from her hand, a ring, and placed it on a nearby table with a small, shaking motion. "I can't do this," she said quietly. No drama, no screaming, just finality. Then she looked at Emilia for a long second. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "for what you walked into." Amelia held her gaze. "I didn't know either," she replied. A shared truth, not enemies, just damage from the same source. Daniel stepped forward one last time. "Wait, don't do this, both of you." But no one was listening anymore. Not the bride, not Amelia, not the guests. The crowd had already started shifting away from him emotionally. The center had collapsed, and he was standing in it alone. Final section. The room slowly emptied into chaotic silence. Guests didn't know whether to stay or leave, but most chose to disappear quietly, as if distance could erase what they had witnessed. Daniel stood alone near the staircase. The bride had left first, escorted by someone who avoided eye contact. Amelia remained for a moment longer. She looked at him, not with rage anymore, not with tears, just understanding the full shape of what he had become. "You didn't just lose me," she said quietly. Daniel looked up slightly. "You lost who I thought you were." That sentence hit harder than anything else, because it wasn't anger. It was truth. Amelia turned slowly, picked up her suitcase, and walked toward the exit. No rush, no collapse, just movement forward. Outside, the air felt colder than before. Behind her, the house still stood decorated for a wedding that no longer existed. Inside, Daniel remained alone, surrounded by flowers, music still faintly playing, and the silence that felt heavier than any accusation. He had not been exposed in a single moment. He had been undone piece by piece, and now there was nothing left to defend, only the echo of what he had destroyed. Amelia did not look back, not once, because some endings are not meant to be revisited, only survived.